Hello and warm welcome to Straight from the Heart, a podcast by Pragyan Advisory. I am Vivek Tiwari, your host. In the last several months, and I would say the whole of 2020 and 2021, we have realized the importance of having deep and focused conversations like never before. And taking a leaf from the lessons learned, we have termed this particular series as Conversations. As part of Conversations, today we have someone who is a global coach and a consultant. Her clients are across all industries from innovative tech companies to not for profit to global banks. She's an author, has worked in senior human resources leadership positions, talent and organizational development roles, a pioneer in Agile HR and people experience, a co-founder of the consulting firm PXO Culture. Dear listeners, please welcome Natal Dank. Natal, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be here.
Okay. I'm interested to have this conversation with you. And just to set the context right for all our listeners and viewers, the overall theme of our discussion today is Agile HR and its importance. So I know that Natal is very passionate and has deep experience in this area. So without wasting any time, I'll straight away jump into my first question. And Natal, my first question, and I'm very inquisitive about this, is what is Agile HR and how is it different from the way HR usually or traditionally works?
Thank you, Vivek. I would say that it's interesting that the theme of your podcast is around conversations. And if you want to get into sort of what's at the heart of an agile approach within human resources, it's about having a much more collaborative, conversational-based approach with the business. So how do you really understand what the experience is that people have at work, and how do you build solutions that are validated on data and have been tested based on the user experience that people have at work, and actually makes their life better and easier. So that's kind of what it's all about. And Agile HR is not a thing in itself. What it is taking the concept of agile and business agility into the world of human resources. So that means it becomes very customer centric, which means it's human centric. And it's all about how do you start to define value. So Agile is about how do you deliver value through to your customer by sort of validating quickly through short cycles of work and essentially build a solution incrementally. So test and learn, what's the data, what's the evidence, and then move on to the next cycle. So if you take that into the world of HR, it's all about how do you know what's valuable for your business and your employees? Mm-hmm. How do you prioritize your time around the most important things to solve? How do you deliver value through the employee experience that then goes through to the end customer of an organization? And how do you know that what you're doing is the right thing? How do you get the data? How do you get the evidence? And a big part of that is working in a way that you co-create the solution with your people. So it's no use kind of just designing something and then implementing out the policy top down onto your people. How do you know that's even going to work? So this is about how do you get into the problem? How do you use design thinking? How do you experiment? How do you test? And then gather data before you start to roll that out across the organization. So it's really kind of re-engineers how HR approaches their work. And the great thing is, as I said, it's not from HR, it's actually from the way business works. And we're seeing organizations across the world be very successful in embracing this mindset and this way of working. And so HR can benefit so much from working in this way because you kind of let go of things like the traditional way of doing change management and you start to build the solution with your people. So it's more sustainable, it's more human-centric, and it's actually going to help people get the job done, which is what it's all about. The other key thing is that it also breaks down, I think, the kind of the traditional way that HR worked, and for anyone that comes from the world of HR, they'll appreciate this. We're very siloed within the profession itself. So we're very functional based. So some people work on learning, some people work on recruitment, some people work on, leadership development, acquisition, exactly, reward. But actually, as we know, if you want to design in the employee experience, you need all of that in the same solution. So it's about being much more multifunctional in our approach and much more holistic in how we design the employee experience, much more like the customer journey that you would be designing within the organization. So that's sort of everything that sits within the world of Agile HR. But ultimately, you've got to find your own approach. So there's not sort of one way of doing it.
Lovely. I could see the passion oozing through, faced with a lot of experience. So I heard a few things, and I'll just, sort of recap for our viewers and listeners. So there's one part, and it reminded me of our old days of, designing solutions. There was a waterfall approach, and then there was a agile approach. So agile approach is much more, quicker, shorter in sprints. It takes the feedback quickly. It creates the solution and takes the feedback and reinvents the solution if it is required. It's about, you're saying, people experience. It's about the business, and it's about the values. I think that those are the few things that I heard. In between, I think you also used the term design thinking, and I was very, interested because this is something that's been used by the business for quite some time, and at times it's unlocked huge value. So how does, just for the sake of our audience, and even for me, how does design thinking, works in this whole sphere of agile HR?
Well, I think it's quite crazy that HR is maybe only starting to use design thinking in many ways, isn't it? Because if you think about what HR is doing for an organization, it's designing solutions to help people get their job done. And of course, we should be using the best way to do that. And as you said, for business across the world, design thinking has unlocked a very powerful way of designing products and services. And what it is that, so there's a couple of things to it. I think the first one is that, and I'll give you an example, but I'll just sort of break it down a little bit. So HR have topics that are hugely complex and very multifaceted and actually quite hard to define. So things like well-being, what does well-being mean in the workplace? Things like, feeling engaged and motivated. What does that even mean? And then also we got these big topics like performance management, and also how do you build a reward and benefits approach that people feel like they're getting enough for what they do, but they're also getting, recognized for the contributions they make, these kind of things. So a lot of what we do is quite intangible almost, and actually very complex. So design thinking is about understanding the problem that you need to solve in a much more data-driven way. So, okay, you might have a business challenge that says something like, so I'll go into an example. So something like there was a company that they had thousands of managers. It was a really big company. And all the managers said, oh, we really need learning and training. We feel like we need to get better at what we do. But no one had time to go to a training program. So they were always too busy. And because they didn't have time to take 2 days out of the workforce to go and do some training. So this team went, well, okay, so we've got this dilemma. We need managers that need to get better at what they do, but no one wants to come to training. So what are we going to do? So they used the design thinking where they went and actually did some research, human-centric interviews. What's going on for you, manager? What problems are you facing in the workplace? What do you need when you say you want to do training? What's going on for you? So really kind of digging deeper into the problem, and then looking at data from the business, looking at kind of ways of working, and starting to really kind of start to prioritize what are the pain points for managers in this organization. And from that, they had a series of problems to solve. And one of the first ones is they realized that managers didn't see what they did. So when they thought about training, they didn't think, oh, I need to go off and do feedback skills because I need to develop my feedback in a better way. What they saw is that on a certain day, they would have a problem to solve. oh my God, I've got to go and give someone I've got to have a really tough conversation tomorrow. I don't know how to do that. Or, oh, someone's left in my team and I want to hire the best person for my team, but actually I don't know how to do that. So they would see these little problems, well, not little problem, but, significant issues to solve, but on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
So what the team did is went, okay, well, let's prototype and let's test different solutions of trying to solve these everyday problems that managers are facing. And so what they realized is that could they get some bite-sized learning? So digital learning, videos, maybe talking to a coach, maybe coming to a short little workshop to the manager when they had that problem. So the manager that needed to hire the person, if they could get that kind of learning to them on the day that they had it, the manager went, oh yeah, oh definitely, I want to watch this video, oh I want to do this digital resource, oh I want to speak to this coach because I need to solve this problem right now. And what happened is by doing all these various prototypes, they started to develop a whole new way of doing management development. Right. And by the end of it, they had built this whole new kind of learning infrastructure that was very much on demand. It was all about kind of linking into when managers got emails or when managers kind of needed to do something in the kind of the work process that they had, they suddenly got an opportunity to do some learning and solve the immediate problem that they had. And this meant that they redesigned the whole way they did management development just by breaking the problem down into smaller chunks. And if we go back to what I said earlier, if you think about things like well-being, engagement, finding talent in a competitive marketplace, they're really big problems and you can't do it all in one time. You've got to break it down. You've got to find out what's going on. And then you've got to go and find the pain points and the smaller problems to solve and start to prioritize and prototype it, test at that level. And then over time, that's the incremental development that you mentioned earlier. It builds up into this whole new way of working. So that's where design thinking can just revolutionize HR. And what it means is it's much more data-driven because when you're doing those prototypes and tests, if something doesn't work, then you don't go forward with it, but you haven't invested all this time and money yet. You've done it on a very kind of small level. If it does work, then yes, this is exactly the direction we should go. And now let's put more time and money into it. So just like business, this is what you're trying to do, isn't it? You're trying to get to what's the value for the customer as fast. How do we know that as fast as we can? How do we know we're going to solve the problem? How do we know that the customer is going to engage with it, maybe buy it? And now let's develop it. Yeah. So.
Thank you. Wonderful. And while I was listening to you, I also realized that at a very deep level, it's also about a high degree of humility because we are not coming with, I know the problem in its entirety and I know the solution and therefore let's implement it. It's about, I can design a solution, but I would need co-creation to happen. And definitely. I am not saying that I know I have been able to discover the solution fully. I'm ready to experiment, learn, modify, adapt, even discard.
Exactly.
And that's,
Yeah. And I think that's a really nice way of putting it. And, that's why you hear terms in the world of Agile, such as fail fast, learn fast, how do you want to rapidly know what doesn't work because you need to, because that means you're going to be closer to what does work and what is the value. And I think in the world of business and definitely traditionally in the world of HR, there was this idea of, we know, or that, we've done it before in another organization, so it will work here. There's a lot of, senior stakeholders in business that have quite strong opinions about how to do people, solutions.
Right.
But actually that's often driven by assumption and opinion. It's not, or maybe their past experience. It's about, okay, we've all come with great ideas and we all know what's maybe worked elsewhere, but we've now got to test and validate for the context that we're in. And if you think about what's happened in the world of work, the pandemic, this huge kind of uncertainty and change that's gone through the marketplace, I need to rapidly innovate. So you've got to just work in such a new way. And so a lot of what we've done in the past in the world of HR doesn't suit this environment anymore. And actually, how do you know it's going to work? You've got to get the data and the evidence. And so this way of working means you can actually get to value faster, which is what you want, isn't it? So I would also say that another part of Agile HR, which we haven't really talked about yet, is that if you think about the changes in the workplace, so there's a big theme around business agility overall, isn't there? So how do you build more collaborative, multifunctional teams? How do you become more of a network and less of a hierarchy? How do you move at speed within your own organization? How do you scale up or scale down different parts of the business based on changing customer needs or changing markets based on, if you think about the pandemic, whole parts of the market shut down. Right. So if as a business, you had to then quickly scale up maybe your digital part or, an area where you could get a different kind of product out. To do all of that, you need so much more flexibility in how you do your organizational design, how do you develop skills, how do you build teams. And the traditional way of HR doesn't fit into that. It's very hierarchical. It's very process driven. So actually, Agile HR is recognizing that you need a new way of doing the solutions around that, and to put in that flexibility. So the way you do performance, the way you do learning, the way you build teams needs to change. And so Agile HR touches into that part as well. Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. And one more thing I noticed was it's presenting things in a very different manner from a customer or a client's perspective. So it's not, I am offering you a feedback training. It's not like that. It's about, tell me in your life, when you're performing your role, what is it that you face on a day-to-day basis, which is causing you some problems? And let's think through it and design something which will help you perform your role more effectively. So it's definitely like, placing the customer in the center and then designing things around.
Definitely.
Which I think automatically creates this great idea of getting a buy-in, which is a big issue. Because if it's like my solution, then I have to sell it. But if it is your problem, which I'm trying to discover and solve, I think the buy-in is already there.
Definitely. And that's what got me so excited about the topic when I first sort of discovered it myself, kind of by accident in many ways. I worked for a company where I was asked to help them transform performance and reward for a very agile part of the business, and got challenged to work in a new way. And because I turned up with my solution, this is the blueprint, and it was really cutting edge. It was really, we're going to, remove ratings, and we're going to have more collective ways of doing reward. But of course, the head of IT, who was my sponsor, said, well, how do you know it's going to work? What's the evidence? What's the data? You need to experiment and test, and then we'll make some changes. But by then doing that, by working very closely with different teams, looking at what worked and what didn't in terms of feedback, performance, conversations, reward, once we made changes, there was still some debates and discussions, but there was so much part of the solution. So they understood why we were doing it, and they were part of it. And it just transformed. I went, yes, this is what you want. This whole idea of managing change, let's make it much more about co-creating change and having that buy-in already there, and then and building it kind of together. And so it's a much nicer way of as well, and much more human way of doing human resources, which is what it should be about.
Great. So I'll move on to my next question, because the idea seems to be extremely powerful, and it has worked in many industries across geographies. So I would like to understand from you, basis your experience, what are some of the prerequisites that organizations and leaders must consider and put in place as they plan to move towards agile HR? And what are some of the challenges or roadblocks we may face when we move away from the traditional way of doing it into a more agile way of doing HR?
So it's a good question. I think that, so my first one is that there's no use embracing agile unless you know the problem you're trying to solve. Because a lot of people talk about, we're going to go agile, but actually there's you've got to, why are you doing it? What's the purpose? What's the change that you want to see? Because ultimately Agile is a mindset and a way of working that doesn't just give you the outcome. You need to know why you're doing it. So that's the big thing. So, for a business, it might be something like we need to rapidly digitalize and innovate our products. We might need to become more flexible in how we actually deliver solutions or services into the customer. And so for HR, it's quite similar. It's often we're trying to digitalize the employee experience. Often we're trying to deliver the solutions faster. We're trying to break down kind of very heavy processes and make them much more streamlined and user-centric. We're also often trying to, everyone talks about this idea of, the building a great employee experience and, attracting the best talent. And okay, so how are you going to do that? What does it really look like? So being very clear on the problem that you're going after. And because that's what you should be talking about. You shouldn't be talking about going agile. You should be talking about the problems you're trying to solve. And then it's much easier for people to start to embrace a new way of working because it's all about, solving that problem, and they've got that clear purpose. I think that's really important because unless you know why you're doing it, people don't have the same kind of motivation or buy-in. The next one is then this idea of, so Agile, as you talked about earlier, it's moving. So as you said, the history of Agile is we've often worked in a more waterfall way in organizations. So this is designing everything up front, and then you kind of, then you kind of go, right, I'm going to have my budget and I've got my plan, and I've got my kind of roadmap, and then I've got all my documentation. And then, 6 months down the line, you actually implement the solution. Now that's okay if there's not too many dependencies, if you kind of can control most things and your plans aren't going to change. But most big projects and most big pieces of work now, your plan, the world is changing constantly, and you can't, it's not stable, is it? So you can't hold on to that. So it's recognizing that we're going to work in these shorter cycles. We're going to embrace experimentation, and we're not necessarily going to, we're going to use data, and we're going to be disciplined in how we do it, but we're also not kind of blueprinting the whole solution up front. So that's kind of starting to, you've got to get ready to be more of this, having more of this experimental mindset. And that's a bit different. That's kind of letting go of perfection and understanding that, I'm going to tap into different ways of data and evidence to build the perfect solution rather than thinking I know what that is up front. And that takes it. So senior leaders have to be more open to that. And then there's very much around taking that into how you start with Agile. So see it as a small experiment in itself. So go, all right, for 3 months, we're going to try this new way of working. We're going to focus on a certain topic or a certain project, and we're going to bring a multifunctional team together. And that's very important, not just a few business partners by themselves or one kind of learning team. Bring a multifunctional team together and then give them that space. So for 3 months of actually using Agile to solve the problem. By the end of it, how did it go? What was the data? What was the evidence? Are we working better? What would we do differently next time? And what you find is if you do it that way, people they're much more comfortable because they think, okay, I don't have to have all the answers just yet. I'm going to learn how I start to apply this. And as they start to apply, they also, they get better results. There's real kind of energy in it. It's a very exciting and kind of energized way of working. And so by the end of the 3 months, people are really enthused. Okay, yes, I want to keep doing this, but they've also learned from the experience. So they've actually got better at what they're doing. And then after that time, you can start to sort of take that out into a more sustainable way of working. What you find is that that's a bit hard for senior leaders to give people space to experiment with new ways of working without making them still applicable to old targets or old, reporting structures or old kind of processes. So that would be my big sort of call out, is that allow people the space to truly learn and experiment. And through that, you will then get a much better way, you get a new operating model from it eventually, but you need that space to begin with. Yeah.
Thank you. So few things which stood out when you were sharing this particular answer of yours. I think one was to be very clear about what's the problem that we are solving. Why is something that we need to be very clear. The comfort with experimentation and shorter cycles. I think that's the second thing that stood out for me. Bringing in a multifaceted team, not just one or two teams. Um, and I think giving them the space and also allowing people to be comfortable with this new approach, because the organizations are by and large set up in a particular way to do work, as we talked about the waterfall methodology, or having everything first sorted out as a solution and then the implementation of the solution. It's like a compartmentalized way of working. At first, I'll discover what's the problem. Once I have discovered the complete problem in its entirety, I will design the solution. Once I've designed the solution, I will get alignment for the comprehensive solution. And once I've got the alignment, I will then start implementing. So that's the way
exactly
sort of people are comfortable. And
this is what meantime, the whole world has changed and your solution doesn't fit the need anymore.
Boy, so that was really helpful. What I'll do is, leveraging your experience, it would be great to hear from you how you and your team implemented agile HR solution with any of your clients. Of course, you can keep the confidentiality intact. I do understand that in the beginning you alluded to the MDP program, the way it worked, you following the HR, but maybe another example, and we would be interested in going through the journey or the major, parts of the journey, the way the Agile HR was implemented by you. It would be great for our listeners.
Sure. So earlier I gave sort of more of an example of kind of using design thinking and Agile specifically around a certain topic. I'll talk a bit about one that I worked on last year, where we were looking at how do you actually get a whole function of HR. So this was a function of about 100 people within a bigger company. And how do you get the whole of HR sort of embracing a agile cycle, but also prioritizing their work based on this definition of value. So, and so the problems that we were trying to solve is that this team, this function, they were doing great things for the organization. They were very modern, very kind of, and they had been using things like design thinking and agile ways of working, but they'd been doing it at team level. So your learning and development team was doing a few things with it. Your reward team was using it. Another team was using it, but they were always, all the HR strategy, there was sort of this disconnect. So at the strategy level, you talk about, okay, we need to, find, so it was a tech company. We need to find tech talent in the global organization. We need to, develop our leaders to be able to lead in a more innovative way. And then they'll have something around kind of well-being. They had a diversity and equity strategy goal. So you have all that, but then all the teams sort of individually would start designing solutions to try and meet these needs. And everyone would have their own kind of operating plan and their own kind of strategy, and they'd start delivering out. So what happened is you ended up having lots and lots of activity across the whole of HR, loads of solutions coming out to the business. But actually, how do you know that these were the right things to work on? And everyone was super busy, but there wasn't always the evidence of the impact and the value that this was, that this was actually helping the business be better at what they did as a company. And then constantly along would come senior leaders. Oh, well, we've got this crisis in the business, right? We've got to actually focus on this. And so then there would be a dropping down of tools. Oh, okay, let's go and react to this. So the big challenge was how do we work in a way that we are delivering the value that matters the most? And how do we do that in a prioritized way? And how do we measure that? And how do we do that for the whole of the function rather than just at individual team levels? So we embarked on a kind of sort of a 6 months journey around building a portfolio of work. And this sounds kind of obvious to maybe other parts of the business, but for HR, this isn't something that we've done so much before. And this is a portfolio that is looking at what are all the products and services that are going out across the business that deliver the employee experience, and looking at it in a much more holistic way. So if you've got your employee experience or your employee kind of cycle, then you've got things in there like onboarding, you've got career development, you've got performance solutions, you've got recruitment. Some of those might be going really well. Some of them need more work. Some of them are out of date and you need to get rid of them. So this is much more holistic kind of picture of the whole portfolio. And then if anything new comes in, how do you know that that is the more important to work on versus something that you're already working on? Or how, if you have 5 things that come in from the business, how do you know which one to work on? Do you do all 5? Usually we can't. Usually we can't do all this work that comes our way. So we did a few things. One is we started to work on through an Agile cycle. So an Agile cycle is that you do some planning, and then you commit to a sort of a cycle or a sprint. And so we committed to a month, which is actually quite long for Agile, but for HR, it felt right. And so we would do planning. Okay, what is the most important things to focus on this month? What are we getting done? And what is the tangible deliveries that we will actually see at the end? So if we're doing well-being, what is the actual delivery? Is it that we are delivering some well-being sessions? Is it that there's some people are kind of accessing new benefits? Are people, is there a fund that's going to be happening for people? So what is the actual tangible delivery? Not just slides about what you're going to do. What's the tangible delivery? And then, so everyone would start working, and then we'd do these syncs. So in Agile, you often have stand-ups where everyone gets together, and it's a quick kind of syncing of what you're working on, with the idea that people can self-organize and just get on with it. So we would do that throughout HR. And then at the end of the month, we would do a review and a retro. So a review is an actual review of the work that you have delivered. And this is reviewing your product. So we would do sessions where different parts of HR would demonstrate, like demo the product that they had delivered that month. And it could be anything. There was one where someone talked about the COVID response that they were doing in India, and how they had designed, benefits and kind of assistance for people in the company in India to take care of them, to keep them well, to make sure they could get to a doctor, to make sure they could take the time out that they needed, to kind of all these. So they did a demonstration, and then we would get feedback. Then we would look at the data. How well did this work? What would we do differently next time? How would we now improve this product? And then we'd do a retrospective, which is all about how you work as a team. So what's worked, what hasn't, how do we collaborate, what are the tools? And then you go into your next year, of course, you've got to the end of the cycle, and you do your next planning. Now that sounds really simple, but actually to get a HR team to commit to that month on month, and every month be talking about the very tangible delivery that they're going to be doing against the prioritized work, it's a whole new world, basically. So then we also designed this portfolio, and the portfolio was about having a very high level visualization of all the work across HR. So this is products and strategic work, business as usual. And so then having much more realistic conversations about, okay, where's my capacity? How do we get this work done? If something urgent comes in, what would actually stop to go and get this urgent thing done? And having much more kind of real conversations about what is the most valuable thing to be focusing on. And then over time, of course, bringing in data to determine, was what we just worked on the most valuable? What's the evidence? What's been the impact on the business? And now when the new thing comes in, okay, how do we know that this is the most important thing to now spend our time on? So it took a while, because it was a very different way of kind of deciding where to spend your time and how to spend your time. But by the end of it, it's this sort of just really great, kind of more efficient, productive, but also really powerful way of working where the business is starting to recognize, oh, wow, HR just delivered these things this month and this year. And here's all the evidence of how it worked and how it's helped us do our business differently. And yeah, they're definitely working on the most important things that we need for our organization. So it's a really, it was quite a powerful way of kind of seeing a whole HR function change over time. But the big challenges were working in our functional functions, being siloed. We had to overcome that. We had to build a very multifunctional way of when a new problem comes in, how do you bring a group of people around it to solve it and get it done quickly, rather than, one person becoming the project manager and then trying to, then doing their plan. And then, 6 months later, you implement the solution. And you also had to rapidly you kind of determine the problem. So something comes in, well, what is the actual problem to solve here? Quickly do some design thinking, some discovery work, and then quickly move into, all right, well, what's the first tangible thing we're going to deliver? And what does that look like? And then, what does that look like next month and the month after that? When would we know we're finished? So a lot of HR projects go forever. And when do you actually stop them? When do you move on to the next problem? When do they move into business as usual? When do you streamline what you're doing? So all of this it's a kind of very business orientated way of running your HR function. And for anyone that works in business, you're probably thinking, this is not that new, like this happened. But for HR, this was quite a new way of working. So, yeah.
Lovely. I think this was fantastic, the way you took us through the journey. And I think it provided much more clarity to the very first question also, in sense that I asked, that how is Agile HR different from the traditional way of doing HR work? And this examples clearly told us the way it is effective and it is different. Three things stood out for me. I think one was it being iterative. I think that's one thing that stood out for me.
Yes.
Second thing that stood out for me was it being collaborative. So it's not one function, but it's collaborative. And the third thing that stood out for me was outcome orientation, that there's a tangible outcome that we tend to deliver collaboratively, which we have designed in an iterative manner. So I think these three things really stood out for me in this particular example. So thank you for sharing that with us. And amazing thing is that in 6 months, that's what you said was the duration of the project. 6 months.
Yeah. So it's still going. And of course, they now have a portfolio lead and a team that kind of looks after this new ways of working. And of course, the whole of, the teams are still developing. But this new way of working happened in that time. Definitely did some things that you would do differently next time, but that's what Agile learning is all about, isn't it? So
fantastic. So what I'll do is maybe after getting a very concrete and clear idea because of this example about how it really works, there's a question that always comes to me when I'm working with my clients, with our clients, with the client of Pragyan. And this question is, and maybe I thought it's great to hear from you some views from your side, with so much of technology that's being talked about and implemented, right? And the ratio of HR people to the employees, where they need to partner, that's gone through the roof. At times, it seems as if the human touch or experience in HR has started dwindling. That's how it appears at times. It's become too impersonal. What role do you think Agile HR can play in such a scenario?
Well, for me, I think it's why you need to embrace Agile HR, really. So, technology in the workplace is about simplifying the complex. It's about helping people get their job done. So a digitalized, employee kind of service should be about how does it help them get so everyone in the business has something to do to deliver the value through to that end customer. And that end customer might be someone that buys your products and services, or it might be someone in the community that you provide a community service to. Whoever that is, everyone's working towards that. So any tech that HR implement should be helping them do that. If it's adding to that job, then actually you've got it wrong for starters. So if it feels like it's an add-on and it's actually yet another task to do, then I think we need to really consider that. And this is where Agile helps you, because any tech that you are bringing into the workplace, you need to validate that this is solving a problem, that there's a reason to implement this tech. I think there's a big danger in the world of HR. There's big tech players, let's be honest, and there's some big systems out there, which, yes, they can help people get the job done. But if they're implemented just in view of managing a process or collecting data or completing a compliance request or managing policy, then that's not the right intent. And it's also not going to help people get their job done. So for me, it's any tech that you introduce needs to be validated. It needs to be based on a user experience, and you need to evidence that this actually helps people in the organization. If you're doing all of that, then there would be a human touch already, because it's about the user experience of work. So a great one, is performance management. Performance management, everyone's always reinventing performance management. And there's so many products out, big systems out there that can help you do performance management.
Yes.
But that's missing the point. What is performance? Performance is about helping people understand how they're doing in their job. It's about that they can get feedback from either a manager or people that they work with about what they do well and how to get better. It's about people understanding the impact that they're making on the customer or the product they're designing or the piece of system that they work on. And it's about getting recognized for that. It's not, so that could be something to do with actual money. It could be something to do with getting just actual appreciation and recognition. It might be just even feedback. But there's something about how do you get recognized for your contribution. We then bring in this whole big tech system where people kind of have to log in and they complete their objectives, and then they send that to somebody to get feedback. And then often there's competencies in there that everyone has to fill in and rate themselves. Then you have, a review, and that review might happen, I don't know, every 6 months, every year. And so that can feel really heavy as a process, can't it? And then what starts to happen with that process is there's some compliance. So maybe, for regulatory reasons, we think we need to collect certain data, or we've decided that, the manager must sign off on something that someone's put into the system. So then it has to go through all these steps of approval before anyone can actually do it. So no one wants to actually do this process anymore. It's so heavy and it's so time consuming, and it just feels like a process, where actually it's about having a really good conversation with either your manager or your workmates about getting the job done. So we need to strip these things back and go, okay, so if we want people to have really good conversation, what's the tech that helps them do that, as opposed to what do we think the tech solution is before we implement, or just using something that's already there.
Right.
And I think if we start doing that a bit more, and we start to tap into the user experience, the problem to solve, then whatever tech we implement reflects that. And actually tech in HR, it should be freeing people up to go and do the conversation part, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's evidence at the moment that, people need more of the human element. So the counseling, the coaching, the mental health conversation, the how are you? And so that should, if there's streamlined processes and better tech and self-service based on that tech for everyday things, then HR can start to be that coach and the counselor, and that's a good thing. So that's also where we should get the human touch back. Yeah.
Great. I think what I realized is, because the central point of Agile HR is user experience, invariably it brings in the strong connect with what at times is in the background when we implement technology in a more blind fashion. And what I mean by blind fashion is because it has worked in a particular organization and that organization is highly successful, let's also copy the complete HR tech
Yes.
product in our
Yeah.
organization, and that will help us solve our problem
Yeah.
without realizing that, perhaps our context is very different, and therefore,
Yeah.
instead of enabling HR, it actually becomes a bit of a burden in a sense that,
Definitely. And
yeah,
a burden on the workers, on the
on the work.
employees. So the people that are doing the jobs, and I think that's the ultimate test, when you ask people, oh, does this help you get your job done? If they say
Mm,
no, it's extra work, it's a burden, then you're
mm.
going to have to question it, don't you?
Yes.
So yeah. So I think that's, yeah. So flip it. We need to flip the perspective. And as you said, talk to the user, which is the employee and the manager and the leader, rather than what we think is the right
Yeah.
process or the way to get the job done. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing. We've termed this whole series also conversations, because we realize that, it's important to have deep, focused conversations. And somewhere I saw that when tech gets blindly copied, and there's a plethora of processes and policies, the downside of it is that people lose the ability and the value of having deep conversations.
Yeah, definitely.
They tend to see technology as the solution to anything and everything, and therefore the relevance of really having deep conversation gets impacted in a negative sense. So
Yeah.
this was helpful. I think this was very
Yeah.
helpful, the way you
Yeah.
shared this particular. So I'll come to the last part of our conversation today, and it's about, I know that you're also an author, and you've written a wonderful book about Agile HR. So we would like to hear from you, your experiences. We've heard, and now coming to your book, what are some of the practical, insightful, impactful nuggets that you would
Mhm.
like to call out from your book, which you realize that these are, what I would say, pearls of wisdom, which are really relevant when we start implementing Agile HR.
Yeah.
So yeah, something from your book.
Sure. Okay. So, well, I think the key message is, um, you can't do it all. So there's I don't know, we're just in the world of business and life. We're just faced with so many things to do, and in the world of HR, there's you've got these huge complex topics. You want to enrich the employee experience, you want to make everyone engaged, you want to build the best talent, but that is just massive and so complex and so overwhelming. So the big thing is knowing that and going, okay, how do I let go of that and start understanding what is the most important problem to solve for my business at this point in time, and go and get something done really well. And that's not, over the next 5 years, that's over the next couple of months. Go and solve that problem, break it down and solve that problem and deliver something well. And then use that experience to get some data, okay, that's a good way of working. Actually, now what's the next most important problem to solve? So that prioritization of moving away from the wish list and the kind of, oh, I've got so much,
Mm,
I'm overwhelmed with all the things we need to deliver, and actually going, okay, well, these are this is the three most important things. Let's go and
mm,
get this done in the next 3 months. And then after that, okay, now what's the next most important thing? So for me, that's kind of, it's, and over that, and everyone gets a little bit worried, oh, but um, how do you know that you're going to deliver, this one's really important as well, and we're going to let people down, or we kind of got to, different parts of the business need different parts of the different solutions. Yes, but that's always going to be the case, and you've got to actually prioritize based on data and value. So
mm,
and that is then tapping into as we've been talking about, this user experience of work.
mm,
let go of let go of the assumed way of working, the big bang, one size fits all, and go and discover what is the pain point or the problem to solve at that level of the employee and the team. And by focusing on that, it actually becomes much easier to rapidly deliver and rapidly solve problems and rapidly deliver value. So that's what it be. Let go of the complex, chuck out your wish list, get back to kind of, right, what's this, what's the 3 main important things to go and do over the next 3 months, and actually do them and measure them and look at how it worked and what didn't work, and then use that learning into your next cycle of work. And one thing that I would say for anyone is that, so a really nice way to get started, if people haven't done that much Agile, is actually using personal Kanban. So Kanban is a visualization tool. It's been around for ages, not really Agile per se, but it's a really nice way to manage your workload. And you can do this on a personal level, as well as with your team, as well as with a whole function. And it has different columns. So there's the main columns is a backlog, and then to do, doing, done. And the whole idea is that you can't put something into done and something else into doing unless you've actually completed it, unless there's something tangible that you've got. And so don't go and fill your big doing column with all these activities without getting something done first. And doing that on a very basic level each day as you're on your own personal, you actually can't get that many things done each day. You think you can, but actually you don't. Your time goes pretty quickly. And if you want to do something really well, then you need to give it time. So you get much better at understanding your own capacity, at understanding how to prioritize. And if you can, if you've got so many hours left in the day and there's 5 things in front of you to do, how, are you actually going to do the whole 5? Do you actually just get 1 done and then tomorrow you'll come to the next? And what if something urgent comes in by the next day? How do you manage that? And just by embracing that kind of constant prioritization, planning, reevaluation, defining value, defining what's done, it transforms your whole working life. And for me, this is the only way to really do time management, I think, is to actually work in this way, have this visualization of your work. So yeah, that would be a big call out. Go and embrace personal Kanban. There's lots on the internet to help you. And also, of course, get the book, because there's a whole way that you can follow to do it with your team.
Thank you, Natal. I will definitely recommend the book, which is Agile HR: Deliver Value in a Challenging World of Work. Quite an interesting read, and practical and insightful. And I must say thanks a lot, Natal, for taking time out and having this conversation with us. I'm sure our listeners they will immensely benefit from your views, your perspectives, and I would say practical insights emerging from where you have really implemented Agile HR with your clients and delivered results. So thank you. Appreciate you taking time out.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.